Marcus Thompson wiped the grease from his hand with an old rag, squinting at the vintage Chevy engine he'd been rebuilding for the past 3 weeks. The small garage in rural Montana felt like home to him after 25 years of turning wrenches and solving mechanical puzzles that stumped younger technicians. At 52, Marcus had seen every kind of engine problem imaginable, from seized pistons to blown transmissions, but he never expected his expertise would save humanity. The morning started like any other. Coffee at dawn, radio playing classic rock, and the familiar smell of motor oil mixing with crisp mountain air. Marcus had always preferred working alone, finding peace in a methodical process of diagnosing problems and coaxing life back into dead machines. His customers knew him as the guy who could fix anything with wheels, and his reputation stretched across 3 counties. Around 10 in the morning, something unusual caught his attention. A low humming sound drifted through the open garage door, different from the usual traffic on Highway 89. Marcus paused, wrench in hand, listening carefully. The sound grew stronger, accompanied by a strange vibration that made the tools on his workbench rattle softly. He stepped outside, shielding his eyes against the bright sun. High above the mountains, a massive shadow moved across the sky. At first glance, it looked like a storm cloud, but the edges were too defined, too geometric. As Marcus watched in growing amazement, the shape descended slowly, revealing itself to be something that belonged in science fiction movies, not the quiet valleys of Montana. The craft was enormous, easily the size of a football stadium, with a sleek metallic surface that seemed to shift and shimmer in the sunlight. Strange protrusions extended from its hull, like mechanical tentacles, each one pulsing with an eerie blue light. The humming sound intensified, and Marcus felt the vibration in his bones, similar to standing next to a massive diesel engine at idle. Other people emerged from nearby buildings, pointing and staring at the impossible sight. Mrs. Henderson from the diner across the street stood frozen with a coffee pot still in her hand. The mail carrier stopped his truck in the middle of the road, gawking through his windshield. Everyone seemed paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of what they were witnessing. Marcus, however, found himself studying the craft with the same analytical mindset he applied to broken engines. Something about the way it moved reminded him of a machine struggling with a mechanical problem. The descent wasn't smooth. There were subtle jerks and hesitations, like a transmission slipping between gears. The blue lights flickered irregularly, and the humming sound contained an underlying roughness that any experienced mechanic would recognize as trouble. The alien vessel settled into the open field behind his garage with surprising gentleness, despite its obvious size and weight. The landing created a small crater in the earth and sent dust clouds billowing in all directions. As the dust settled, Marcus could see more details of the craft's construction. What he observed made his mechanical instincts kick into high gear. The hull showed signs of damage along several sections, with scorch marks and dents that suggested recent combat or rough travel. More importantly, he could see what appeared to be access panels and maintenance ports similar in concept to the service points on any complex machine. The blue lights were definitely malfunctioning, flickering in patterns that reminded him of failing electrical systems he'd diagnosed countless times. Within minutes, smaller shapes began emerging from openings that appeared in the craft's hull. The beings that stepped out were unlike anything from Earth, standing about 7 feet tall with elongated limbs and heads that seemed too large for their bodies. Their skin had a metallic sheen, and they moved with mechanical precision that made Marcus think of robots rather than living creatures. The aliens immediately began setting up equipment around their vessel, working with efficient coordination. Marcus counted at least 50 of them, each carrying devices that hummed and sparked with unknown energy. They paid no attention to the humans watching from a distance, treating the local population like insignificant obstacles rather than threats. From his position near the garage, Marcus overheard fragments of communication between the aliens, transmitted through speakers built into their equipment. Although he couldn't understand their language, the tone and rhythm sounded familiar. It reminded him of radio chatter between truckers discussing mechanical problems, the kind of technical conversation he'd heard thousands of times over his CB radio. As he listened more carefully, Marcus began to recognize patterns in their communication that transcended language barriers. The urgency in their voices, the repetitive nature of certain phrases, and the way they gestured towards specific parts of their ship all pointed to one conclusion. They were dealing with a serious mechanical crisis. This realization changed everything for Marcus. Instead of seeing terrifying alien invaders, he began to view them as stranded travelers dealing with a broken-down vehicle. His fear transformed into professional curiosity, and he found himself unconsciously analyzing their situation from a mechanic's perspective. The aliens' equipment appeared to be scanning and testing various components of their vessel, much like the diagnostic tools Marcus used to troubleshoot engine problems. He could see frustration in their body language as readings apparently came back negative, and their communications grew more urgent and repetitive. Marcus made a decision that would prove crucial for humanity's survival. Instead of fleeing like most sensible people would, he decided to observe and learn. He retreated to his garage, but positioned himself where he could watch the aliens work while remaining hidden behind a stack of old tires and engine blocks. For the next several hours, Marcus studied the aliens' repair efforts with the same intensity he'd apply to a particularly challenging automotive problem. He watched them remove panels, test connections, and replace components with a universal frustration of mechanics everywhere when nothing seemed to fix the underlying issue. As the day progressed, it became clear that the aliens were running out of options. Their gestures grew more agitated, and their communications took on the desperate tone of people facing a deadline they couldn't meet. Marcus began to suspect that their ship wasn't just broken. It was completely disabled, leaving them stranded on a planet they'd apparently intended to pass by quickly. The true scope of their problem became apparent when Marcus noticed they'd begun unpacking what looked suspiciously like weapons. The devices were sleek and advanced, but their purpose was unmistakable. The aliens were preparing for a prolonged stay on Earth, and they didn't seem inclined to be friendly neighbors. This was when Marcus realized that his mechanical expertise might be the key to solving a crisis far bigger than any engine repair he'd ever attempted. The aliens needed to fix their ship, and from what he'd observed, they were failing miserably at the task. If they couldn't leave voluntarily, they might decide to make Earth their new permanent base, which would be catastrophic for everyone. Marcus Thompson, small-town mechanic, found himself in the unique position of possibly being humanity's only hope. The irony wasn't lost on him that after 25 years of fixing pickup trucks and tractors, he might need to repair an alien spacecraft to save his planet. The challenge was enormous, but for the first time in his life, Marcus felt like everything he'd learned was preparing him for this moment. Marcus spent the entire night developing his plan, knowing that one wrong move could doom not just himself, but potentially all of humanity. From his hidden position in the garage, he continued observing the alien repair efforts, taking mental notes of everything he witnessed. The beings worked in shifts, never leaving their vessel unguarded, but their frustration was becoming increasingly obvious as each attempted solution failed. By dawn of the second day, Marcus had identified the core problem. The aliens were approaching their repairs like computer programmers, running diagnostics, and replacing components based on theoretical calculations rather than practical mechanical intuition. They were missing the kind of hands-on troubleshooting that came naturally to someone who'd spent decades working with actual machinery. The breakthrough came when Marcus noticed how the aliens tested their power systems. They would activate various components in isolation, checking each subsystem independently before attempting to integrate them. This methodical approach was logical, but fundamentally flawed for the type of problem they faced. Marcus recognized the symptoms of what mechanics called a cascade failure, where multiple systems malfunction due to one underlying issue that can only be identified by understanding how all the components interact. Marcus had seen similar problems in complex diesel engines, where a single failing sensor could cause the entire fuel management system to behave erratically. The solution often required ignoring the diagnostic computers and instead listening to how the engine actually sounded and felt while running. Computers could tell you what should be happening, but experienced mechanics could hear what was actually happening. The alien ship exhibited classic signs of this type of failure. The power distribution was uneven, causing some systems to overload while others remained underutilized. The humming sound that had first caught Marcus's attention was actually the ship's equivalent of an engine knock, indicating that the core power plant was operating outside its optimal parameters. But knowing the problem and solving it were two entirely different challenges. Marcus needed to get close enough to the alien ship to perform a proper diagnosis, which meant approaching beings who had already begun unpacking increasingly sophisticated weapons as their frustration grew. Marcus spent hours developing his approach strategy. Direct confrontation was obviously impossible, but he noticed patterns in the aliens' work schedules. They maintained constant guards around their ship, but the guard's attention focused outward, watching for threats from the human population rather than monitoring their own equipment. More importantly, Marcus had observed that the aliens seemed to treat mechanical work as beneath their notice. The beings who performed repairs were clearly of lower status than those who carried weapons or operated communication equipment. This social hierarchy might provide the opening Marcus needed. The opportunity came on the afternoon of the second day. The alien repair team had removed a large panel from the side of their ship, exposing what appeared to be the main power distribution center. The complex array of conduits, connections, and control systems looked alien in design, but familiar in function to Marcus's experienced eye. The repair team was struggling with a diagnostic sequence that involved testing individual power circuits. Marcus could see them growing increasingly frustrated as each test yielded confusing results. Their instruments indicated that all components were functioning normally, but the overall system clearly wasn't working properly. Marcus made his move during a shift change among the guards. He approached the work area carrying his own toolkit, moving with the confident stride of someone who belonged there. His strategy was simple but risky. Act like he was supposed to be helping with the repairs, and hope the alien's apparent social hierarchy would work in his favor. The gamble paid off initially. The alien repair team glanced at Marcus when he approached, but they were so focused on their failing diagnostics that they didn't immediately react to his presence. Marcus positioned himself near their exposed power systems and began examining the setup with professional interest. What he discovered exceeded his expectations. Despite their advanced technology, the aliens had designed their power distribution system using principles that were fundamentally similar to terrestrial electrical networks. The components were exotic, and the materials were beyond human technology, but the underlying logic of how power flowed through the system was something Marcus could understand. The problem became apparent within minutes of hands-on examination. The aliens had been treating each power circuit as an independent system, but Marcus could see that they were actually designed to work in harmony, with each circuit providing feedback to optimize the others. One circuit had a damaged sensor that was providing incorrect feedback, causing the entire network to constantly readjust in ways that created instability throughout the ship. Marcus began working on the problem, using hand signals and pointing to communicate his observations to the confused alien repair team. They watched with growing interest as he traced power flows and identified connection points that their instruments had missed. Marcus pulled out his own multimeter, a simple device compared to their advanced scanners, and demonstrated how to test the actual electrical flow rather than just the theoretical capacity of each component. The aliens initially seemed skeptical of his primitive tools, but when Marcus's multimeter readings revealed discrepancies that their own instruments had missed, their attitude changed dramatically. They began following his lead, using their advanced equipment to confirm what his simple tests were revealing. Working together despite the language barrier, Marcus and the alien repair team quickly identified the faulty sensor that was causing the cascade failure. The component was small and seemingly insignificant, but its incorrect feedback was creating chaos throughout the ship's power grid. Marcus showed them how to isolate the damaged sensor and reroute its functions through backup systems. The repair itself took less than 15 minutes once the problem was properly diagnosed. Marcus guided the aliens through the process of recalibrating their power distribution network, explaining through gestures and demonstrations how to balance the load across all circuits simultaneously rather than optimizing each one individually. When they powered up the repaired system, the change was immediately obvious. The irregular humming that had plagued the ship since its arrival smoothed into a steady, powerful tone. The flickering blue lights stabilized, and throughout the vessel, systems that had been struggling began operating at full efficiency. The alien repair team was visibly excited by the successful repair, chattering rapidly in their own language while gesturing toward Marcus with what appeared to be respect and gratitude. For a brief moment, Marcus allowed himself to feel proud of solving such a complex problem. He had successfully repaired an alien spacecraft, something that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. However, Marcus's satisfaction was short-lived. As word of the successful repair spread through the alien crew, their entire attitude toward their Earth visit began to change. With their ship fully operational again, the aliens started packing up their equipment with new urgency. But instead of preparing to leave, they began deploying it in patterns that Marcus recognized from military documentaries. The aliens weren't planning to depart now that their ship was fixed. They were preparing to establish a permanent presence on Earth, and their newly operational vessel gave them the power to enforce their will against any human resistance. Marcus realized with growing horror that his successful repair had inadvertently given Earth's invaders the capability to complete their conquest. Marcus had solved the aliens' mechanical problem, but in doing so, he had created a much larger crisis for humanity. The beings who had been stranded and vulnerable were now at full strength and ready to assert their dominance over their new territory. His expertise had saved the aliens, but it might have doomed his own species. As Marcus watched the aliens organize their equipment into what was clearly a military deployment, he understood that he needed to find another solution. Fixing their ship had been the easy part. Now he had to figure out how to convince them to leave Earth voluntarily, or find a way to disable their vessel permanently without triggering a violent response that would endanger the local population. The mechanic who had just performed the most complex repair of his career now faced an even greater challenge, undoing the consequences of his success before it was too late for everyone he cared about. Marcus retreated to his garage that evening with his mind racing through possibilities. The aliens had thanked him for the repair work by allowing him to leave unharmed, but their military preparations made it clear that his usefulness to them had ended. Tomorrow, they would likely begin asserting control over the surrounding area, and Marcus knew that human resistance would be futile against their advanced technology. Unable to sleep, Marcus spent the night poring over everything he'd observed about the alien ship's construction and operation. There had to be something he'd missed, some weakness or vulnerability that could be exploited. His mechanical instincts told him that every complex system had potential failure points, but identifying them required understanding how all the components work together. The breakthrough came at dawn when Marcus realized he'd been thinking about the problem incorrectly. Instead of looking for ways to damage the ship, he should be thinking about how to make it want to leave. The aliens had clearly been on some kind of journey when they'd experienced their breakdown. Their ship was designed for long-distance travel, not planetary occupation. If Marcus could determine their original destination and purpose, he might find a way to motivate their departure. Marcus returned to his observation post near the alien encampment, but this time he focused on their communication equipment rather than their weapons. The aliens maintained constant contact with something beyond Earth's atmosphere, transmitting regular status reports and receiving what appeared to be instructions or updates. Listening to their transmissions, Marcus began to recognize patterns that reminded him of the dispatch communications he'd heard from trucking companies and delivery services. The aliens' tone when communicating with their superiors was deferential and occasionally defensive, like drivers explaining delays to impatient dispatchers. This observation led Marcus to a stunning realization. The aliens weren't independent invaders choosing Earth as their target. They were essentially delivery workers or transport crew members who had broken down during a routine mission. Their military equipment and hostile preparations weren't necessarily for conquest. They might be standard procedures for protecting their cargo and themselves while stranded in unknown territory. Marcus needed to confirm this theory, which meant getting close enough to observe their operations in greater detail. He waited until the afternoon shift change, then approached the alien encampment using the same confident strategy that had worked during his repair mission. However, this time he carried a small handheld radio tuned to various frequencies, hoping to intercept and analyze their communications. The gamble worked again, partly because several aliens recognized Marcus from the previous day's successful repair work. They didn't welcome him enthusiastically, but they didn't immediately drive him away either. Marcus positioned himself near their communication equipment and began monitoring their transmissions while pretending to inspect nearby mechanical systems. What Marcus discovered changed everything about how he understood the situation. The aliens were indeed part of some kind of interstellar transport operation, and they were carrying cargo that needed to be delivered according to a strict schedule. Their breakdown had put them behind schedule, and their superiors were becoming increasingly impatient with the delays. More importantly, Marcus learned that the aliens' aggressive preparations weren't for conquering Earth. They were preparing to defend themselves against something else entirely. Their communications revealed growing anxiety about potential pursuit by rival factions who might try to steal their cargo while they were vulnerable. The aliens weren't planning to stay on Earth permanently. They were trying to complete their repairs quickly enough to reach their destination before their cargo became worthless or before their enemies tracked them down. Earth was simply an inconvenient stopping point, not a desired conquest. This revelation completely changed Marcus's understanding of the crisis. The aliens didn't want to be on Earth any more than humans wanted them there. If he could help them solve their remaining problems and get back on schedule, they would probably leave voluntarily and never return. But there was a complication. During his eavesdropping on their communications, Marcus learned that the aliens' cargo was more problematic than he'd initially realized. They were transporting what appeared to be refugees from some kind of interstellar conflict, beings who needed to reach a specific destination within a limited time frame for their own survival. The alien crew was under enormous pressure to complete their mission successfully. They couldn't afford to spend weeks or months on Earth making perfect repairs to their ship. They needed solutions that would get them back into space quickly, even if those solutions weren't ideal from an engineering standpoint. Marcus found himself facing a moral dilemma. He could probably sabotage the alien ship in ways that would keep them stranded on Earth indefinitely, which might protect human interests in the short term. But doing so would doom innocent refugees to death and might eventually bring more aggressive alien forces to Earth when the transport failed to reach its destination. Alternatively, Marcus could help the aliens complete their mission quickly and efficiently, which would remove them from Earth, but might also demonstrate human capabilities to alien civilizations that could pose future threats. As Marcus wrestled with this dilemma, he noticed something about the aliens' repair work that hadn't been obvious before. They were rushing through their tasks with growing desperation, making mistakes that created new problems even as they solved existing ones. Their haste was causing quality control issues that would likely result in more breakdowns during their journey. Marcus realized he had a unique opportunity to influence the situation in a way that could benefit everyone involved. If he could help the aliens complete their repairs properly, while also establishing positive relations between humans and their civilization, he might be able to ensure both Earth's safety and the refugee survival. The key was demonstrating that humans could be valuable allies rather than primitive obstacles. Marcus's mechanical expertise had already earned him some respect among the alien crew. If he could expand that respect into genuine cooperation, he might be able to negotiate an agreement that satisfied all parties. Marcus approached the senior alien who appeared to be in charge of the repair operations. Using a combination of gestures and simple sketches in the dirt. He attempted to communicate his understanding of their situation and his willingness to help them solve their remaining problems. The aliens' response was initially suspicious, but Marcus's demonstrated competence from the previous day's work gave him credibility. When Marcus began pointing out potential issues with their current repair approach and suggesting more reliable alternatives, the aliens' attention became focused and serious. Working through the language barrier was challenging, but Marcus discovered that technical problems created a universal vocabulary. By demonstrating concepts with tools and components, he could communicate complex ideas about mechanical systems and repair procedures. The collaboration that developed between Marcus and the alien repair team was unlike anything that had ever occurred in human history. Despite vast differences in culture, biology, and technology, they found common ground in the shared challenge of making complex machinery function properly. Marcus learned that the aliens' approach to mechanical problems was heavily influenced by their advanced materials and manufacturing capabilities. They were accustomed to replacing components rather than repairing them, which worked well under normal circumstances, but created difficulties when replacement parts weren't available. In return, Marcus introduced them to human concepts of improvisation and adaptation. He showed them how to modify existing components to serve new functions and how to create temporary solutions that could extend the life of failing systems. The cultural exchange was fascinating, but Marcus never forgot that the clock was ticking. The aliens' communications with their superiors were becoming increasingly urgent, and there were ominous references to pursuit ships that might be closing in on their position. Marcus needed to help the aliens complete their mission quickly, but he also needed to ensure that their departure would be permanent and that future alien visitors would have positive expectations about human cooperation rather than viewing Earth as a potential conquest target. Marcus knew time was running out when the alien communication equipment began receiving what were clearly distress signals from their superiors. The urgency in their transmissions had escalated beyond impatience to something approaching panic. Through careful observation of their reactions and the equipment displays, Marcus determined that the pursuing ships were much closer than anyone had realized. The alien crew chief, whom Marcus had begun thinking of as chief based on how the others deferred to his authority, was facing an impossible decision. Their ship could probably make the jump to hyperspace with current repairs, but the odds of completing their journey without additional breakdowns were poor. However, staying to make proper repairs would mean being caught by their pursuers, which would apparently result in consequences worse than mechanical failure. Marcus approached Chief with a proposal that he'd been developing throughout the night. Using his now familiar combination of gestures and mechanical demonstrations, Marcus explained that he could implement a solution that would get them safely to their destination, but it would require trusting human engineering principles over alien technology protocols. The solution Marcus had in mind was elegantly simple, which was exactly why the aliens had overlooked it. Their ship's power systems were designed with multiple redundancies and safety interlocks that prevented efficient operation under emergency conditions. The aliens' programming wouldn't allow them to bypass these safety systems, even when the alternative was mission failure. Marcus proposed temporarily reconfiguring their power grid to operate more like a terrestrial electrical system, with fewer safeguards but much more responsive control. This would allow them to boost their engine output beyond normal parameters for the short time needed to reach their destination, then return to standard configuration once they were in safe territory. Chief was initially skeptical of Marcus's proposal, partly because it violated fundamental principles of alien engineering philosophy. Their technology was designed to be foolproof and operate safely under all circumstances, which made it very reliable, but also limited its emergency capabilities. Marcus explained his reasoning using analogies that Chief could understand. Sometimes a vehicle needed to be driven hard to escape immediate danger, even if that driving style would cause long-term damage under normal circumstances. The key was knowing when the immediate threat outweighed future reliability concerns. To demonstrate his point, Marcus showed Chief how human mechanics sometimes modified engines for emergency performance, temporarily removing governors and safety limits to achieve power levels that wouldn't be sustainable long-term. The practice was risky, but it had saved countless lives when applied correctly. Chief consulted with other members of the alien crew, and Marcus could see the debate was intense. They were clearly weighing the risks of trusting an alien solution against the certainty of capture if they remained on Earth much longer. The decision was ultimately made when their long-range sensors detected the approaching pursuit ships had accelerated and would arrive within hours rather than days. Marcus was given permission to attempt his modification, but with the understanding that failure would leave them completely defenseless against their pursuers. The pressure was enormous, but Marcus felt confident in his analysis of their power systems and the modifications needed to implement his solution. The work began immediately, with Marcus directing a team of alien technicians through the delicate process of reconfiguring their ship's power distribution network. The aliens were nervous about bypassing safety systems that had been integral to their technology for generations, but Marcus's previous success with their repairs gave them enough confidence to follow his instructions. The modification process was more complex than Marcus had initially anticipated. The alien power systems had layers of interdependent controls that needed to be carefully adjusted in sequence to avoid catastrophic failures. Each change required testing and calibration before moving to the next step, and mistakes could potentially destroy the entire ship. Marcus found himself working faster than he'd ever worked in his life, driven by the knowledge that pursuit ships were approaching and that hundreds of refugee lives depended on his success. The alien crew chief stayed close to the work area, monitoring their long-range sensors and providing updates on how much time remained before the pursuers arrived. As the modifications neared completion, Marcus became aware that his work was being observed not just by the alien crew, but by human authorities who had finally responded to reports of the alien landing. Military vehicles were visible on the horizon, approaching slowly but steadily. Marcus realized he was literally caught in the middle of multiple converging forces, any of which could turn violent if the situation wasn't resolved quickly. The final modification required the most delicate work of all. Marcus needed to install a manual override system that would allow Chief to control the ship's power output directly, bypassing all automatic safety systems. This was similar to installing a manual transmission in a vehicle that had only been designed for automatic operation, requiring careful integration of human engineering concepts with alien technology. With only minutes remaining before the pursuit ships entered Earth's atmosphere, Marcus completed the installation and began the startup sequence for the modified power systems. The alien crew watched tensely as their ship's energy readings climbed beyond anything they'd seen before, approaching levels that their training told them were impossibly dangerous. Marcus monitored the power flow using both his simple multimeter and the alien's advanced diagnostics, watching for signs of system overload or component failure. The modification was holding, but barely. The ship's power grid was operating far outside its design parameters, and Marcus could see stress indicators approaching critical levels throughout the network. Chief made the decision to attempt immediate departure, even though the pursuit ships were now visible as bright points of light in Earth's upper atmosphere. The alien crew worked frantically to secure their equipment and prepare for emergency acceleration, while Marcus continued monitoring the power systems to ensure they remained stable during the high-stress departure sequence. The moment of truth came when Chief activated the modified power systems for full emergency acceleration. Marcus watched 15 seconds of the most intense mechanical stress he'd ever witnessed, as every component in the alien ship operated beyond its design limits. Power readings spiked to levels that should have destroyed the entire vessel, but Marcus's modifications held just long enough for the ship to achieve escape velocity. The aliens disappeared into hyperspace just as their pursuers entered Earth's atmosphere, leaving Marcus standing in an empty field with a handful of human military personnel who arrived minutes too late to witness the departure. The entire crisis had been resolved in 15 seconds of perfectly executed emergency engineering, but those 15 seconds represented the culmination of days of careful analysis, cultural exchange, and mechanical improvisation. Marcus realized he had just participated in something unprecedented in human history. He had successfully cooperated with an alien civilization to solve a complex technical problem, demonstrated human engineering capabilities to advanced extraterrestrial beings, and potentially established Earth's reputation as a planet of skilled and trustworthy allies rather than primitive potential threats. The implications of what had occurred would take years to fully understand. But Marcus knew that those 15 seconds had changed everything about humanity's place in the universe. His simple mechanical expertise had resolved a crisis that could have escalated into humanity's first interstellar war. And in doing so, he had opened possibilities for future cooperation that no one had ever imagined. The weeks following the alien departure brought Marcus more attention than he'd received in his entire lifetime. Government officials, scientists, and media representatives descended on his small Montana garage like a swarm of locusts, all desperate to understand exactly what had happened during those crucial 15 seconds that saved Earth from potential invasion. Marcus found the questioning process frustrating because most of his interrogators wanted to focus on the aliens' advanced technology rather than understanding the fundamental mechanical principles that had made the solution possible. They expected complex explanations involving theoretical physics and exotic materials, but the reality was much simpler and more practical than they could accept. The truth was that Marcus had succeeded where the aliens failed because he approached their problem as a mechanic rather than as an engineer or scientist. While the aliens had been constrained by their advanced knowledge and safety protocols, Marcus had the freedom to improvise solutions based on practical experience rather than theoretical limitations. Marcus tried to explain this concept to the various experts who interviewed him, but most of them struggled to understand how simple mechanical intuition could outperform advanced alien technology. They wanted to believe that humanity's salvation had required revolutionary insights or breakthrough discoveries, not just the practical application of basic engineering principles. The government officials were particularly interested in the potential military applications of what Marcus had learned about alien technology. They pressed him for details about the ship's construction, power systems, and defensive capabilities, clearly hoping to reverse engineer alien advances for human use. Marcus disappointed them by explaining that most of what he'd observed was far beyond current human manufacturing capabilities. The aliens' materials and components were centuries ahead of terrestrial technology, and their basic tools were more sophisticated than humanity's most advanced equipment. Simply knowing how their systems worked wouldn't enable humans to duplicate them without massive advances in material science and manufacturing precision. However, Marcus did share insights that proved valuable for humanity's future development. His observations of alien engineering philosophy revealed approaches to problem-solving that could be adapted for human use even without alien materials. The aliens' systematic approach to diagnostics and their integration of multiple redundant systems offered lessons that could improve terrestrial technology within existing limitations. More importantly, Marcus's successful cooperation with the alien crew had established a precedent for human-alien relations that would influence future contacts. Word of the incident had apparently spread through alien communication networks, because Earth began receiving subtle signals from various extraterrestrial civilizations that had never acknowledged human existence before. These communications were indirect and cryptic, but linguists and code breakers gradually determined that they were essentially diplomatic inquiries. Other alien civilizations wanted to understand humanity's capabilities and intentions, particularly regarding technical cooperation and problem-solving assistance. Marcus became an unofficial ambassador for these early diplomatic contacts, not because of any formal training, but because his mechanical expertise gave him credibility with civilizations that valued practical problem-solving abilities. Aliens who might have dismissed human politicians or scientists as primitive took Marcus seriously, because he had demonstrated genuine skill in their universal language of engineering. The role was challenging for someone who had spent his career avoiding publicity and working independently. Marcus found himself traveling to government facilities and research institutions, helping teams of experts analyze alien communications and develop responses that would maintain Earth's reputation as a reliable partner for technical cooperation. Through this process, Marcus learned that his 15-second solution had impacts far beyond simply helping one alien crew complete their mission. The refugees they were transporting had been fleeing from an aggressive faction that was expanding through their region of the galaxy, conquering or destroying civilizations that couldn't resist their advanced military technology. The successful completion of the refugee transport mission had delivered crucial intelligence about the aggressive faction's capabilities and intentions to a coalition of civilizations that were organizing resistance efforts. Marcus's mechanical intervention had quite literally helped prevent the expansion of an interstellar empire that would have eventually threatened Earth along with countless other worlds. Marcus also discovered that his solution had impressed the alien engineering community in ways he hadn't anticipated. The concept of deliberately bypassing safety systems to achieve emergency performance was apparently novel to civilizations that had eliminated risk-taking from their technological development. Human willingness to accept calculated risks in exchange for enhanced capabilities was seen as both fascinating and valuable. This reputation for innovative problem-solving led to requests for human assistance with technical challenges that had stumped alien civilizations for decades or centuries. Most of these requests were far beyond current human capabilities, but some involved approaches to mechanical problems that could benefit from human perspectives on improvisation and adaptation. Marcus found himself consulting on projects ranging from deep space mining equipment to interstellar communication systems, always working through remote communication links, but gradually building relationships with engineers from dozens of different worlds. These collaborations resulted in technological advances that benefited both humanity and their alien partners. The most significant development was the establishment of Earth as a recognized member of an informal network of civilizations that shared technical knowledge and provided mutual assistance during emergencies. This network had existed for millennia, but Earth had been considered too primitive to participate until Marcus demonstrated human engineering capabilities. Membership in this network brought access to scientific knowledge that accelerated human technological development by centuries, but it also came with responsibilities. Earth was now expected to contribute solutions to problems facing other civilizations, and failure to meet these expectations could result in isolation or worse. Marcus helped establish training programs that prepared other humans to work with alien technology and engineering principles. These programs combined traditional mechanical education with courses on alien materials science, xenobiological engineering constraints, and cross-cultural technical communication. The goal was to create a generation of human engineers who could serve as effective partners for alien civilizations while maintaining the practical problem-solving approach that had made Marcus's solution possible. This required balancing advanced theoretical knowledge with hands-on mechanical intuition, a combination that proved challenging but achievable. Years later, Marcus reflected on how his quiet life as a small-town mechanic had evolved into something he could never have imagined. His garage in Montana had become a training center for interstellar engineering cooperation, and his reputation as the human who fixed an alien ship in 15 seconds had made him one of the most respected figures in galactic technical circles. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus that humanity's entry into galactic civilization had been achieved not through military conquest or scientific breakthrough, but through the practical application of basic mechanical principles by someone who had never intended to do anything more significant than fix broken pickup trucks. Marcus's story became a symbol of humanity's unique approach to problem-solving and our value as partners in an increasingly connected universe. The 15 seconds that saved Earth had opened a future where humans and aliens worked together to solve challenges that neither could handle alone. proving that sometimes the most profound changes begin with the simplest solutions applied by the most unlikely heroes. The small-town mechanic who had just wanted to fix a noisy engine had instead fixed humanity's relationship with the cosmos, demonstrating that expertise and determination could overcome any barrier, whether technological, cultural, or interstellar. Marcus Thompson had become living proof that in a universe full of advanced civilizations, there was still tremendous value in the uniquely human ability to see simple solutions to complex problems.